2024 has been a very interesting year in video games. There's been a lot of controversy or negative discourse around a lot of games, and there's been a lot of surprise failures. There's also been a lot of surprise successes, whether it be Black Myth Wukong, Stellar Blade, Dragon Age the Veilguard, or Concord. It seems like you can't escape some sort of controversy or some sort of discourse around any of these games. Now, at the same time, there have been games that have pretty much avoided every bit of negative discourse, whether that be Final Fantasy VII Rebirth or Astrobot. Another one of these games that has somehow managed to avoid every bit of discourse has been Metaphor Refantazio. Now listen, I'm a big Persona fan. I'm not going to pretend that I've played from the very beginning or that I've beaten every game or that I know everything about the Shin Megami Tensei series. But listen, whenever Persona 4 Golden came out on the PlayStation Vita, it was kind of a game changer for me. I fell in love with that game. I couldn't get enough of it. So after that came out and Persona 5 came out, I absolutely adored that game as well. Really enjoyed my time with Persona 3 Portable, which I actually played on the Vita as well. And then also now the Persona 3 kind of remaster, reboot, remake, whatever you want to call it. I've really enjoyed that as well. So whenever Metaphor Refantazio was first announced, I was actually a little skeptical. As much as I love the Persona series, I'm not the biggest fantasy fan. Of course, I love the Lord of the Rings series, and I really enjoyed some of my time with Game of Thrones, but I don't naturally gravitate to the fantasy setting, and so for me, I was actually really skeptical coming into Metaphor Refantazio. But with that being said, I had enough trust within the team of Atlus that this was going to be somewhat enjoyable. And I have to give credit where credit is due. Atlus deciding to do a extensive demo pre-release was huge. It actually kind of reminds me of whenever Final Fantasy 16 had its demo of the prologue released for you to play in its entirety before the game came out. As soon as I finished my time with the demo of Final Fantasy 16, I said, okay, the music's incredible, the gameplay is really good, I'm really excited to see where the story goes. I'm buying this game immediately. And now, luckily for me, I'm one of those people who really love Final Fantasy 16. I think that game is extremely special. Now, whenever Atlus said, hey, we're going to let you play this game and this prologue for quite a bit of time before you actually buy the main game, I was thrilled. I wanted to see if the game and the story and the setting would resonate with me. Because once again, as someone who is not a fan or huge fan of fantasy, I was a little nervous of whether or not I would actually enjoy it or whether or not the game would click with me at all. And here's the thing, I actually really enjoyed my time with the demo. I played about 10 hours of Metaphor Refantazio before the game actually came out, and I got a nice feel for how the story was going to flow, how the gameplay was going to flow, even though they don't even show you every single mechanic within that first 10 hours of the video game. That's just kind of an Atlus Persona thing. But the demo did enough for me to be somewhat interested in the game. I really liked the characters that it introduced. The world felt sort of familiar, surprisingly. It felt something more along the lines of a Game of Thrones than something like a Dungeons and Dragons type of thing. And of course, the gameplay felt very familiar as a Persona fan. It felt, okay, this is a visual novel meets turn-based RPG, and I really enjoyed it. It was good. So it was enough to sell me on the game, and I decided, okay, let's give it a try. And I'll say this about the game. And after my first 20 hours or so with this game, I felt as if this had potential to not just be my favorite Persona or Shin Megami Tensei or whatever you want to call it type game. I was like, you know what, this may be up there in my top 5 favorite video games of all time. It's getting there. And truth be told, the game never did anything to necessarily take that away from it. All the good things are still there, and all those good things continue throughout the game. But I'll tell you, as someone who is getting a bit older, who's having a much busier life than I used to whenever Persona 4 Golden came out, this game is just almost too much. That's my biggest complaint with the game, is that there's almost too much here. And so while Metaphor Refantazio is great, it feels like it overstays its welcome, which actually reminded me a lot of another game most people probably don't relate this game to at all. Earlier this year, I played through Mafia Definitive Edition, Mafia 2, and Mafia 3. And I really enjoyed all of those games. And the last one, Mafia 3, I thought was a much better game than people had initially said it was. But it was a game that suffered from having too much going on. And if it focused on its story primarily, it would have been a much more heavily praised game. Now, Metaphor Refantazio doesn't quite fall into that same level as Mafia 3. At least with Metaphor Refantazio, all of it is developing and building a story and its characters. But by the time that I finished the game, around the 90-hour mark, I was exhausted. I was ready to move on. I don't like when video games start to feel like homework, when it starts to feel tedious. I get there's a long lineage of JRPGs of just grinding and filling time just to fill time. It's the same reason why I actually don't like TV series that much. I don't finish a lot of TV series because it feels like too large of an investment. And so Metaphor Refantazio is a great game. And certainly for some people, it will be their game of the year. About halfway through Metaphor Refantazio, I thought, you know what, this might be my game of the year. But after looking back and thinking about Final Fantasy VII Rebirth and actually thinking about Astrobot, I don't know if Metaphor Refantazio is my game of the year. I don't think it quite reaches the highs that Final Fantasy VII Rebirth hit for me. I don't know if it actually even hit the highs of something like Astrobot. But Metaphor Refantazio is a incredible game. It's an incredible achievement from the Atlas team to step away from what has been so comfortable to them with the Persona series, and even to step away a little bit from the rest of the Shin Megami Tensei series, and to dive into a whole new world that feels pretty well fleshed out. The lore is great. I love what they do with all the history for every single race in this world, in this universe. And obviously, once you get towards the end, you'll discover that there's a little bit more to be seen into this story and in this world. Now, most of those things have been explored in other fictions and other fantasy stories before, but I won't get into that so I don't spoil any of it. But it's executed all pretty well for the most part. Now, obviously, I haven't even spent any time talking about the style, like the menus, the UI, the music, any of those things. Those are all as good, if not better, than maybe you expected it to be. I do actually think some of the side dungeons are a little dull in terms of their design. This engine is starting to show its age and sort of its ability to create a super immersive dungeon or aesthetic, but clearly they have the ability to do it, especially really late game. Some of those dungeons become really unique and cool looking, but the dungeons I don't think ever hit the fun creativity of Persona 5. But once again, all of those negative comments that I have about the game are squashed by the positives. As I talked about some of these other games that have come out this year that have had controversy, whether it be surrounding, different social topics or things of that nature, Metaphor Refantazio kind of talks about those things. But the beautiful thing about Metaphor Refantazio is there's a nuance to almost every different perspective in those things. It's not, hey, this can't be claimed by one side or another. It looks at these complicated issues in a complicated way. But ultimately, there's a heart in Metaphor Refantazio that lets you know, hey, what we need to do is understand that everyone has lost someone. Everyone has experienced some sort of grief that makes life hard. And that really resonated with me. There's stuff in my life recently that has been extremely difficult to get through. And Metaphor Refantazio is a really hopeful and uplifting story that doesn't ignore the hardships. And maybe for that reason, it should be my game of the year. Maybe for that reason, it should be considered something more special. And, who knows, maybe at another time in my life, I would think Metaphor Refantazio was the greatest game I've ever played. But as of right now, I think it's a little too long in the tooth. I think it overstays its welcome a little too much. But man, Metaphor Refantazio has some of the greatest characters in any Persona or Shin Megami Tensei video game. It has some of the most fun music and unique music that I've heard in a video game. The combat is great, and I wish there was a better flow of the visual novel style with the combat. I feel like I'm playing less Metaphor Refantazio, and I'm more or so just reading Metaphor Refantazio, which is fine if that's what you're into. If you are a visual novel fan, you are going to be right at home with this game. So yeah, right now Metaphor Refantazio is not my game of the year. That's probably reserved for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and who knows, maybe it could be Astrobot. Or maybe there's another one that I haven't quite finished yet that I'm playing that I'm really enjoying that maybe I'll do a video on about later. So yeah, did you finish Metaphor Refantazio? Did you play it? Tell me what you think in the comments below. Make sure to hit subscribe. And listen, this is a new style of video for me. I've never done anything like this before. If you like it, let me know. If you hate it and you want me to go back to K-pop reaction videos where I just go, great music, you can let me know that too if you want. I probably won't go back to doing it. Maybe. We'll see. Thanks for watching. Y'all take it easy.